Sarah Martinez stared at the eviction notice, her world crumbling around her. 3 days. That's all she had left before she and her daughter would be on the streets. The hospital bills from Emma's surgery had drained everything: her savings, her hope, her future. 2 weeks earlier, she'd thrown a glass of water in a stranger's face. He'd been rude, dismissive, treating the waitstaff like servants. She didn't know who he was, didn't care. Some entitled millionaire who thought money could buy respect. But now, that same man stood at her door with an envelope that would change everything. Inside wasn't money. It was something far more dangerous. A proposal that made her blood run cold. "I'll pay everything. The medical bills, the rent, your daughter's future treatments," he said, his voice steady but his eyes holding secrets she couldn't read. "But there's a condition." Sarah's hands shook as she looked at her sleeping daughter through the bedroom door. She'd do anything for Emma. Anything. But could she trust a man she humiliated? A man whose real motives she couldn't begin to understand? What she didn't know was that accepting his help would unravel a truth so devastating. It would shatter everything she thought she knew about kindness, power, and the price of salvation. The question wasn't whether she could trust him. The question was whether she could survive what came next. Before we continue with Sarah's story, if you believe in the power of redemption and second chances, I'd be so grateful if you'd take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us share more stories like this one. And if this beginning has already touched your heart, a like would mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being here. The water hit Marcus Sullivan's face before he even registered the movement. Gasps rippled through the restaurant as ice cubes slid down his $3,000 suit. Sarah Martinez stood trembling, empty glass still in her hand. Her nurse's scrubs a stark contrast to the designer dresses around her. She'd come to this restaurant for one reason: to confront the man who'd just berated a teenage waitress to tears over a minor mistake. You don't get to treat people like that. Sarah's voice shook but held firm. "I don't care how much money you have. That girl is someone's daughter." Marcus slowly wiped his face, his gray eyes unreadable. The entire restaurant had gone silent. Phones were out, already recording what would become Manhattan's most viral moment by morning. "Do you know who I am?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "I know exactly what you are," Sarah shot back. "Another entitled millionaire who thinks the world exists to serve you." The words hung in the air like accusations waiting for a verdict. Marcus said nothing, just stared at this furious woman in worn scrubs who dared to do what no one else in his carefully controlled world would ever do: tell him the truth. Sarah didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked out, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Behind her, the restaurant erupted into whispered conversations and the click of camera phones. She just humiliated one of the most powerful men in New York City, and she didn't care. She couldn't care, because in that moment, watching him reduce that young girl to tears over a simple mistake, all Sarah could see was every arrogant, entitled person who'd ever looked down on her, on people like her, people who work hard and struggled and deserve basic human dignity. The cold night air hit her face as she pushed through the restaurant doors. Her hands were still shaking. What had she just done? That video would be everywhere by tomorrow. Her face, her voice, her righteous anger broadcast to millions. But as she walked toward the subway station, Sarah couldn't bring herself to regret it. Some things were worth the consequences. Some moments demanded that someone, anyone, stand up and say enough. She had no way of knowing that the man she just publicly humiliated was already replaying her words in his mind. That for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Sullivan was questioning everything he'd become. That her anger had cracked something open inside him that he kept carefully locked away since his father's death. Sarah Martinez had just changed both their lives forever, and neither of them knew it yet. Sarah's hand still shook as she unlocked her apartment door. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a creeping dread. What had she done? That video would be everywhere by morning. She could already imagine her supervisor's disapproving face, the whispered conversations at the hospital, the judgment from people who'd say she should have minded her own business. "Mommy?" 7-year-old Emma's voice called from the bedroom, weak but hopeful. Sarah forced a smile, pushing away the eviction notice she'd received that morning. She'd deal with that later. Right now, her daughter needed her. "Hey, baby, how are you feeling?" Emma's pale face brightened despite the exhaustion etched around her eyes. "Better. Mrs. Chun from next door made me soup. She's so nice, Mommy." Sarah's heart clenched. Her daughter shouldn't have to be this brave. Shouldn't have to understand words like chemotherapy and experimental treatment and denial of coverage. The leukemia diagnosis had come 18 months ago, and Sarah had been fighting ever since against the disease, against the insurance companies, against a healthcare system that seemed designed to break people exactly like her. She sat on the edge of Emma's bed, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. Emma's skin felt warm, but not feverish. That was something. These days, Sarah measured victories in the smallest increments. A day without vomiting, a night without fever, a moment when Emma smiled like the carefree child she should have been. "Tell me about your day, sweetheart," Sarah said softly. Emma launched into a story about the cartoon she'd watched, her words tumbling over each other with an enthusiasm that belied her frail body. Sarah listened, nodding and smiling in all the right places, but her mind kept drifting to the pile of bills on the kitchen counter. $340,000 in medical debt. The number was so large it didn't even feel real anymore. After Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah retreated to the kitchen. The eviction notice lay where she'd left it, stark and official. 3 days. She had 3 days to come up with 2 months' back rent, or she and Emma would be homeless. She'd already borrowed from everyone she knew, sold everything of value, worked every available shift at the hospital until her body screamed for rest. The latest insurance denial letter sat beneath the eviction notice. Experimental treatment, not medically necessary. Those words haunted her dreams. Not medically necessary. As if watching her daughter waste away was somehow acceptable. As if there were a mathematical equation that made Emma's life worth less than the insurance company's profit margin. Sarah poured herself a glass of water and stood at the sink, staring out at the lights of Brooklyn. Somewhere in this city, that millionaire was probably laughing about the crazy woman who'd thrown water in his face, living his perfect life in his perfect penthouse, surrounded by people who'd never dare challenge him. She took a sip and almost laughed at the irony. Here she was, unable to afford to keep a roof over her daughter's head, and she just made an enemy of one of the richest men in New York. Marcus Sullivan stood at the window of his penthouse office, the viral video playing for the 100th time on his phone. Another entitled millionaire who thinks the world exists to serve you. The words echoed in his mind, refusing to fade into background noise of his carefully constructed life. She wasn't wrong. That's what stung most. His assistant, James, cleared his throat from the doorway. The PR team has prepared 3 response strategies. They recommend option 2, a brief statement expressing regret for the misunderstanding, a donation to a service workers charity, and then moving on. The story will die in 48 hours if we don't feed it. Find out everything about her. Marcus's voice was quiet, still focused on the window's reflection. Sarah Martinez. I want to know who she is. Everything." James hesitated, his discomfort evident even in the silence. "With respect, pursuing someone who publicly humiliated you might not be the wisest course of action. It could be interpreted as retaliation or worse. I'm not pursuing her for revenge." Marcus turned to face his assistant. "I need to understand her. What makes someone risk everything to defend a stranger? What kind of person does that?" James knew better than to argue when Marcus used that tone. "I'll have a full report by morning." After James left, Marcus returned to the window, studying his reflection in the darkened glass. When had he become the man in that video? The one who spoke to service workers like they were beneath him? His father would have been ashamed. Thomas Sullivan had built Sullivan Industries from nothing, working alongside every employee, knowing their names, their families, their dreams. He'd always insisted that business could be ethical, that profit and principle weren't mutually exclusive. "Power reveals character, son," his father had said during one of their last conversations before the cancer took him. "It doesn't change who you are. It just shows everyone who you've always been." Marcus had promised himself he'd honor that wisdom. Instead, he'd spent 3 years proving his father wrong. The board had praised his ruthlessness, his ability to make hard decisions, his focus on quarterly returns over sentiment. They'd called it strong leadership. Sarah Martinez had called it what it really was: entitlement. 24 hours later, James returned with a file. Marcus read it once, then read it again, his face draining of color with each page. Sarah Martinez, single mother, pediatric nurse at Brooklyn Methodist. One daughter, Emma, age 7, diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Medical debt, $340,000. Currently facing eviction. Last major insurance claim denied 2 weeks ago for experimental treatment, described as not medically necessary. Insurance provider, HealthGuard Insurance. Marcus's hands went cold. HealthGuard Insurance was owned by Sullivan Industries. He'd acquired it 3 years ago, part of a portfolio expansion into healthcare. The board had tasked him with turning it around, making it profitable. He'd hired consultants, implemented new protocols, streamlined the approval process, reduced unnecessary expenditures. They called it optimized claim management. The experimental treatment denial, that was his policy, his directive, his signature on the profit optimization strategy that measured success in percentages and margins, never in faces or names or 7-year-old girls fighting for their lives. Marcus set the file down with shaking hands. Sarah Martinez hadn't just held up a mirror. She'd shown him exactly what his decisions looked like when they had a name, a face, a mother willing to throw water at a stranger to defend basic human dignity. He'd killed her daughter. Maybe not directly, maybe not intentionally, but his policies, his priorities, his ruthless pursuit of profit. They'd signed Emma Martinez's death warrant. And Sarah had no idea. Sarah answered the door, expecting the landlord. Instead, Marcus Sullivan stood there, looking nothing like the arrogant businessman from the restaurant. He looked tired, uncertain, almost vulnerable. For a moment, she just stared, her mind struggling to process why this man was at her apartment. "Please don't slam the door," he said quickly, his hands raised slightly as if approaching something fragile. "I have a proposition." "Are you insane?" Sarah's voice rose despite herself. "Get away from my home before I call the police. I don't know what kind of twisted revenge you're planning, but I'll pay everything." The words tumbled out, desperate and raw. The medical bills, the rent, the treatments Emma needs, everything. Sarah's heart stopped. The world seemed to tilt sideways. "How do you know my daughter's name?" Marcus winced at the fear in her voice. "Please, just listen for 2 minutes. That's all I'm asking. 2 minutes. And if you want me gone, I'll leave and never contact you again." Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door, to call the police, to protect Emma from whatever this was. But something in his expression stopped her. This wasn't the cold, dismissive man from the restaurant. This was someone carrying a weight she recognized, the same desperate burden she carried every single day. 2 minutes, she said flatly, not opening the door any wider. "Talk. I know about Emma. I know about the insurance denials. I know you're being evicted in 3 days. I know the treatment she needs costs more than you could ever save." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "And I know I can help. I want to help." "Why?" The word came out sharp, edged with suspicion, and something that terrified her even more. "Hope. So you can humiliate me back? Make me grovel? Get revenge for what I did at the restaurant?" "No." His voice cracked slightly, and for a moment Sarah saw genuine pain flash across his face. "Because you were right about me. Because I've spent 3 years becoming someone I hate. Because I need be better, and I don't know how to start except by doing this. And because your daughter deserves to live." Sarah's breath caught. She wanted to slam the door, wanted to tell him to take his guilt money and leave. But Emma's pale face flashed in her mind, the doctor's words from last week echoing endlessly. "Without the treatment, I'm afraid we're looking at 6 months, maybe less." "What's the condition?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Nobody gives away hundreds of thousands of dollars for nothing, especially not as someone who threw water in their face on camera for the whole world to see. "No condition. Just let me help. Please." Marcus met her eyes, and she saw something there that unsettled her, genuine desperation that mirrored her own. "I don't believe you. There's always a condition, always strings attached. So tell me what you really want." Because I won't let you use my daughter's life as some kind of game or publicity stunt or whatever sick thing this is. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if he were wrestling with words that wouldn't come. Finally he spoke. I'm not a good man, Sarah, but maybe helping Emma, maybe that can make me a better one. That's all I want, a chance to do something that matters, something real. Sarah stared at the stranger on her doorstep, this millionaire who'd somehow learned her deepest fears and was offering her everything she needed. Every rational part of her mind screamed trap. But the mother in her, the desperate woman who'd do anything to save her child, heard something else. She heard possibility. Sarah had barely slept. She'd agreed to meet Marcus to discuss terms, though every instinct screamed this was a mistake. The coffee shop he'd suggested was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of Brooklyn, far from the Manhattan spotlight, where their first encounter had gone viral. She arrived early, ordered coffee she couldn't afford, and waited with her stomach in knots. Marcus arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather folder that looked expensive enough to pay her rent for a month. He sat down carefully, as if afraid sudden movements might spook her. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Sarah didn't return the pleasantries. "You said you'd explain everything. So explain." Marcus opened the folder and slid papers across the table. "I've arranged for Emma to be admitted to Mount Sinai tomorrow morning. Dr. Richardson is the best pediatric oncologist in the country. She's agreed to personally oversee Emma's case. The treatment protocol will begin immediately." Sarah's hand shook as she looked at the documents. Treatment authorization forms, hospital admission papers, everything official, everything real, everything paid in full. Her eyes blurred with tears she tried desperately to hold back. "I've also cleared your rent for the next 2 years and settled the medical debt in full. You'll receive confirmation from the hospital's billing department by end of business today." He slid another document across. "This is a trust fund established in Emma's name. It will cover any future medical expenses, educational costs, and living expenses until she turns 25. "Stop." Sarah's voice broke. "Just stop. I don't understand any of this. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" Marcus leaned back, and for the first time since sitting down, he looked directly into her eyes. "Have you ever done something terrible and not realized it until someone forced you to look in the mirror?" Sarah thought about her words in the restaurant, the water dripping down his face, the rage that had consumed her. "I was angry. I shouldn't have embarrassed you like that. It was wrong, even if you were being. You should have." He cut her off gently but firmly. "I needed to hear it. Needed someone to see past the money and the power and the careful image I built, and tell me the truth about who I become." Sarah watched him carefully, searching for the manipulation, the angle, the hidden cost. All she saw was genuine remorse etched into every line of his face. "But this," she gestured at the paper scattered between them, "this is too much. I can't just take hundreds of thousands of dollars from a stranger. I can't be someone's charity case or guilty conscience project. I need to maintain some dignity, some—" "You're not taking anything," Marcus interrupted. "I'm giving. There's a difference. And you're not a charity case. You're a mother fighting for her daughter's life against a system that's failed you at every turn. That's not weakness. That's strength I'll never possess." Sarah felt tears spilling over despite her best efforts. "But you must want something. Nobody does this without wanting something in return." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "I do have one request. Not a condition. You can refuse, and everything I promised still stands. But I'd like to ask anyway." Sarah stiffened. Here it comes, she thought. The real reason. What is it? Let me be part of Emma's journey. Not as a benefactor. Not as someone seeking redemption points. Just let me visit sometimes. Let me see that this matters, that she matters. Let me watch her get better. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Let me remember why any of this is important. Sarah studied his face, searching for deception, for ulterior motives, for anything that would justify her suspicion. All she found was a man who looked as lost as she'd felt for the past 18 months. "Why do I feel like there's something you're not telling me?" she asked quietly. Marcus's jaw tightened, and something dark flashed across his expression. Because there is. But I'm not ready to tell you yet. And when I do, you'll probably hate me all over again. Emma's treatment began the next morning. Sarah watched as her daughter, so weak and fragile just days before, was admitted to a hospital room that looked nothing like the overcrowded wards they'd known. This room had windows that let in actual sunlight, equipment that looked new, and nurses who moved with calm efficiency rather than harried desperation. Dr. Richardson was exactly as Marcus had promised. Brilliant, compassionate, and genuinely hopeful about Emma's prognosis. And Marcus visited. Not just once, but regularly. First it was weekly, then twice a week, then almost daily. Each time, he brought something small, a book, a puzzle, a stuffed animal that made Emma giggle. Nothing extravagant, nothing that screamed wealth. Just thoughtful gestures that showed he was actually paying attention to who Emma was, not just what she needed. Sarah watched from doorways and bedside chairs as this billionaire businessman sat cross-legged on the hospital floor, reading stories to her daughter in a voice that grew more confident with each visit. He wasn't naturally good with children. His first few attempts were awkward and stilted, but he tried. And Emma, with the uncomplicated acceptance of a 7-year-old, simply liked him. What happens next in the story? Emma asked one afternoon, her eyes bright despite the trailing from her thin arm. The treatment was working. Sarah could see it in the color returning to her daughter's cheeks, the energy creeping back into her voice. Marcus smiled, continuing the fairy tale he'd been improvising for the past 20 minutes. Something about a brave princess and a dragon who was actually just lonely. Well, the princess realized that sometimes the scariest creatures are just looking for someone to understand them. Emma nodded seriously. Like how Mommy says people who are mean are sometimes just sad inside. Exactly like that, Marcus said softly, and Sarah saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of pain quickly masked. After Emma fell asleep that evening, Sarah found Marcus carefully tucking the blanket around her daughter's shoulders, his movements gentle and practiced now after weeks of visits. She likes you, Sarah said from the doorway. Marcus looked up, startled. She's easy to like. She's remarkable, brave in ways I've never been. She gets that from her father, Sarah said quietly, then caught herself. She rarely talked about Daniel, the man who'd left when Emma was 2, unable to handle the responsibility of fatherhood. Or maybe she just gets it from necessity. Children are stronger than we give them credit for. She gets it from her mother, Marcus said, standing slowly. Everything good in that little girl. The kindness, the courage, the way she sees the best in people, that's all you. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked away. Don't what? Don't make this something it's not. Her voice came out sharper than intended. You're helping my daughter. I'm grateful, more grateful than I can ever express. But I'm not some charity case you get to feel good about. I'm not a project or a redemption story or whatever this is for you. Marcus took a step toward her, his expression serious. Is that really what you think this is? I don't know what to think. Sarah's frustration bubbled over. Rich man with a guilty conscience plays hero to the poor single mom and her dying daughter? It feels like a movie, not real life. And in movies, there's always a twist. Always something that goes wrong. So forgive me if I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're right, Marcus said quietly. This isn't real. Not completely. Sarah's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means the truth is so much worse than you imagine. It means I'm not just some guilty stranger trying to do a good deed. It means, he stopped, his jaw working, eyes fixed on Emma's sleeping form. It means you deserve to know everything, but I'm a coward. Because once you know, you'll never look at me the same way again. Then tell me. Sarah stepped closer, her voice low but urgent. Tell me what you're hiding. Tell me why you really came to my door. Tell me the truth. Marcus looked at her, and for a moment she thought he would finally confess whatever secret he'd been carrying. The air between them felt charged, heavy with words unspoken. Then he shook his head. Not yet. Soon. I promise you'll know everything soon. But right now, Emma needs you focused on her recovery, not on hating me. I could never hate someone who saved my daughter's life. Marcus's smile was unbearably sad. Don't make promises you can't keep, Sarah. Sarah couldn't sleep. It was 3 a.m, and Marcus's words kept echoing in her mind. The truth is so much worse than you imagine. What could possibly be worse than a stranger offering help out of guilt? What was he hiding that made him look at her with such profound sadness? She opened her laptop. The screen's glow harsh in the darkness of her small apartment. Emma was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, her breathing steady and strong. The treatment was working. Whatever Marcus's secrets were, he'd given Sarah her daughter back. But that didn't mean she could ignore the warning bells ringing louder each day. She typed his name into the search bar. Marcus Sullivan, CEO of Sullivan Industries. Net worth estimated at $2.3 billion. Philanthropist, entrepreneur. She scrolled through images of him at charity galas, business conferences, ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The man in these photos looked nothing like the person who sat on hospital floors reading fairy tales. She dug deeper, found articles about his business acquisitions, his reputation for aggressive expansion, his ability to turn failing companies profitable within quarters. The business press loved him, called him visionary, ruthless but fair, a man who made hard decisions without flinching. Then she found it, an article from 3 years ago. Sullivan Industries acquires HealthGuard Insurance in $2 billion deal. Sarah's blood turned to ice. HealthGuard, that name was seared into her memory. That was Emma's insurance company, the one that had denied every major claim, the one that had called life-saving treatment experimental and unnecessary, the one that had nearly killed her daughter with bureaucratic cruelty disguised as policy. Her hands shook as she clicked through to the press release. Marcus Sullivan's photo stared back at her, smiling confidently beside the HealthGuard logo. The article quoted him extensively about improving healthcare efficiency, streamlining operations, maximizing shareholder value. She searched for more, found dozens of articles. Whistleblower reports about increased claim denials under Sullivan's ownership, patient advocacy groups protesting HealthGuard's new policies, medical professionals expressing concern about profit being prioritized over care. And through it all, Marcus Sullivan's name, defending the changes as necessary modernization. Sarah pulled out Emma's insurance documents with trembling fingers, spreading them across her kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. Claim denied. Claim denied. Claim denied. Each one stamped with a HealthGuard logo. Each one signed by adjusters working for a company owned by Marcus Sullivan. The experimental treatment that could have saved Emma's life months ago, denied by HealthGuard. The supplementary medications that might have prevented complications, denied by HealthGuard. The specialist consultations that could have caught the progression earlier, denied, denied, denied. All by a company Marcus Sullivan owned. A company he'd specifically tasked with improving profit margins. A company that had treated her daughter's life as a line item to be eliminated for better quarterly returns. Sarah pressed her hands against her mouth, trying to hold back the scream building in her chest. The helpful benefactor. The guilt-ridden millionaire seeking redemption. It wasn't guilt over being rude to a waitress. It wasn't about becoming a better person. He'd caused this. Every sleepless night, every denied claim, every moment she'd held Emma while her daughter cried from pain that could have been prevented. Every time she'd begged insurance representatives for mercy, for compassion, for basic human decency. Marcus Sullivan had built a system designed to deny her daughter care. And then he'd swooped in like a savior, offering to fix a problem he'd created. Her phone rang, shattering the silence. Marcus's name glowed on the screen. Sarah stared at it, her entire body shaking with rage, so pure it felt like fire in her veins. She wanted to scream, wanted to destroy something, wanted to make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused. She answered, "Sarah." His voice sounded strained, urgent. "I need to see you. Tonight. There's something I should have told you from the beginning. Something you need to know before." "I know." Her voice was ice. Pure, cold fury. "I know everything." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. She could almost hear his world collapsing through the phone. "Then you know why I need to see you. he said finally, his voice breaking. Please, let me explain. Let me tell you why. All of it. Explain what? Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay quiet, to not wake Emma. That you're the reason my daughter almost died? That every sleepless night, every denied claim, every moment I thought I'd lose her, that was you? That you built a system designed to kill children for profit, and then pretended to be some kind of saint? Yes. The word was barely audible, and I need to tell you why. Please, Sarah. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. You deserve to hear the whole truth. Marcus was already at the park bench when Sarah arrived just before dawn, the city still mostly asleep around them. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually immaculate appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and hollow eyes. Sarah felt no sympathy. She sat as far from him as the bench allowed, her arms crossed, her entire body rigid with barely contained rage. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. You have 10 minutes. Then I never want to see you again. Marcus nodded, accepting the terms without argument. 3 years ago, my father died. Thomas Sullivan built Sullivan Industries from nothing, starting as a construction worker and ending as the head of a billion-dollar company. He always insisted that business could be ethical, that profit and principle weren't mutually exclusive, that treating people with dignity wasn't just right, it was good business. He stared at his hands as he spoke. When I took over, I was determined to prove I could be as successful as him, more successful. The board pressured me constantly, acquire companies, increase profits, show growth every quarter. They said my father's way was outdated, that I needed to be tougher, more aggressive. That sentiment had no place in modern business. So you chose profit over people, Sarah said flatly. I chose what I thought was survival. Marcus's voice cracked. HealthGuard was hemorrhaging money when I acquired it. Too many approved claims, too much waste. The consultant said. The board told me to fix it or sell it. So I hired efficiency experts, implemented new approval protocols, created algorithms to flag expensive treatments as unnecessary. I told myself I was saving the company, protecting jobs, being a responsible CEO. Sarah felt sick. You were killing children. I didn't see it that way. He looked up at her, his eyes red. That's the worst part. I never saw faces, never saw names, just numbers on spreadsheets, claim approval rates, cost-benefit analyses, profit margins improving quarter after quarter. The board praised me, called it strong leadership, smart business. He pulled out his phone, his hand shaking, and showed her a document. When I read your file, when I saw that HealthGuard had denied Emma's treatment, the treatment that could save her life, I realized what I'd become. I wasn't optimizing healthcare. I was sentencing children to death to boost quarterly earnings. Sarah wanted to hit him, wanted to scream. But she also saw something in his face that stopped her, genuine horror at his own actions, the kind of self-recognition that destroys a person from the inside. So this was all guilt, she said, her voice shaking. Penance for almost murdering my daughter. At first, yes. Marcus set his phone down. But then I met Emma. I saw her strength, her joy despite everything she'd endured. And I saw you, fighting impossible odds with courage I've never possessed, working yourself to exhaustion, sacrificing everything, never giving up even when an entire system was designed to break you. He stood slowly, pacing a few steps away. And I realized this wasn't about redemption anymore. It was about becoming the man my father believed I could be, the man you deserve when you threw that water in my face and told me the truth about who I'd become. Pretty words don't change what you did. No, they don't. Marcus turned back to her. That's why I've spent the last 6 weeks dismantling everything I built at HealthGuard. New policies, new leadership team. Every single denied claim from the past 3 years is being reviewed by an independent medical board and approved where medically justified, regardless of cost. Sarah's breath caught. What? It's costing the company $400 million so far. The board tried to stop me. When I refused, they called an emergency vote and removed me as CEO yesterday. His smile was bitter. I'll probably lose control of Sullivan Industries entirely within the month. The company my father built the legacy he left me. I'm destroying it all. Sarah stood, her mind reeling. You're lying. Nobody throws away $1 billion empire. I'm not throwing it away. I'm paying a debt I should never have incurred. Marcus pulled out another document. This is the new HealthGuard approval protocol. Treatment decisions made by doctors, not algorithms. Patient welfare over profit margins. Everything my father would have insisted on from the beginning. He handed her the papers. I don't expect forgiveness, Sarah. I don't expect anything from you. But you needed to know the whole truth. Emma is receiving the best care because I owe her that. I owe her everything I took away. And so are hundreds of other children whose claims I should never have denied. Sarah stared at the documents, then at Marcus, then back at the papers. You're destroying your career, your reputation, everything. I'm saving my soul, Marcus said quietly. And maybe, just maybe, preventing other mothers from experiencing what I put you through. That's worth more than any empire. Sarah sat beside Emma's hospital bed 3 days later, watching her daughter color with energy she hadn't possessed in over a year. The treatment was working beyond anyone's expectations. Dr. Richardson had used words like remarkable recovery and exceptional response. Emma was going to live. She was going to have a future. Marcus had kept his distance since their conversation in the park, giving Sarah space to process everything. But his absence created a hollow feeling she hadn't expected. Emma asked about him constantly. Where is Mr. Marcus? When is he coming back? Is he okay? Sarah didn't know how to answer. How did you explain to a 7-year-old that the man who saved her life was also the reason she'd almost died? Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Sullivan Industries board votes to remove Marcus Sullivan, reverses healthcare reforms. Sarah's stomach dropped as she read the article. The new CEO was already walking back Marcus's policy changes, calling them financially irresponsible and unsustainable. The Independent Medical Review Board was being dissolved. Claim approval protocols were returning to the algorithmic efficiency model. Everything Marcus had sacrificed was being undone. Another message came through, this one directly from Marcus. She hesitated before opening it, her finger hovering over the screen. Finally, she read, Don't worry about Emma's treatment. I've established an independent trust fund that can't be touched by Sullivan Industries or HealthGuard. She'll have everything she needs, regardless of what happens to me or the company. You both will. This was never conditional on me being part of your lives. I just needed you to know that Emma is protected. Always take care of each other. M. Sarah read the message 3 times, each word settling into her chest like stones. He protected Emma even as he lost everything, expected nothing in return, asked for nothing, just ensured that a little girl he'd met weeks ago would have the future his policies had almost stolen. Mommy, why are you crying? Emma looked up from her coloring book, concern in her bright eyes. Sarah wiped her tears quickly. I'm just happy, sweetheart. Happy that you're getting better. Is it because of Mr. Marcus? He made me better, didn't he? Sarah's throat tightened. How did you explain moral complexity to a child? How did you tell her that the same person could be both villain and hero, that people could do terrible things and still find their way back to goodness? Yes, baby. He helped make you better. Then why doesn't he visit anymore? Did I do something wrong? No, Emma. You didn't do anything wrong. Mr. Marcus is just very busy right now. Emma frowned, her small face serious in a way that made her look older than her years. I think he's sad. When he read stories, sometimes he looked sad, like he had a boo-boo inside that nobody could see. Sarah's heart cracked open. Even through her own suffering, Emma had seen Marcus's pain, had recognized the wound he carried. Children saw things adults missed, truth uncluttered by judgment and complexity. You're very wise, you know that? Sarah smoothed Emma's hair gently. Mommy, can I tell you a secret? Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. Of course, baby. I think Mr. Marcus needs us like we needed him. I think maybe he's lonely and doesn't know how to fix his boo-boo by himself. Emma looked up at her mother with those impossibly perceptive eyes. You always say everyone deserves kindness, even people who make mistakes. Especially people who make mistakes. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face now. unable to stop them. Her daughter, this beautiful soul who'd endured so much pain, was teaching her about forgiveness, about seeing beyond hurt to the humanity underneath. "You're right," Sarah whispered. "Everyone deserves kindness." She pulled out her phone, staring at Marcus's message. He'd sacrificed his empire, his reputation, his future, not for recognition or gratitude, but because it was right. Because children like Emma deserved better than what his policies had given them. He'd faced the worst part of himself and chosen to be better, even when being better cost him everything. Sarah thought about the man in the restaurant who'd been cruel to a waitress. Then she thought about the man who sat on hospital floors reading fairy tales, who'd admitted his failures without excuse, who'd destroyed his own legacy to pay a debt that could never truly be repaid. People weren't simple. They weren't just good or bad, villain or hero. They were complicated and messy and capable of both terrible harm and profound redemption. She typed a response, her fingers trembling. "Emma wants to know when you're coming to finish the story about the dragon. She says you left it on a cliffhanger. Also, she's having a birthday party next week, when she's discharged. She'd like you to be there." "So would I." Sarah hit send before she could second-guess herself. Because maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting what someone had done. Maybe it was about acknowledging the harm while also seeing the person trying desperately to make it right. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. "I don't deserve this, but I'd be honored. Thank you, Sarah, for seeing past what I was to what I'm trying to become. I won't let Emma down again. Or you." 6 months had passed since Emma's discharge in the hospital, and the world looked different now. Sarah stood at the entrance of the same park where Marcus had confessed everything, watching her daughter run ahead with an energy that still brought tears to her eyes. Emma had been in remission for 3 months. The doctors called it miraculous. Sarah called it a second chance at life. Marcus sat on the same bench where their lives had intersected in the most painful, honest way possible. He looked different, too. No expensive suit, no corporate armor. Just a man in jeans and a simple sweater, trying to figure out who he was when stripped of everything he'd once believed defined him. "She's beautiful," he said as Sarah approached, his eyes following Emma's joyful movements. "Strong like her mother." "She asked if you'd come to her actual birthday party next week," Sarah said, sitting beside him. "The one with cake and too many presents and her friends from school. She wants you there." Marcus turned to her, genuine surprise crossing his face. "You want me there?" "I want Emma to know the man who saved her life. Not the CEO who lost his empire. Not the millionaire who gave away his fortune. Just Marcus. The guy who reads terrible improvised fairy tales and taught my daughter that people can change. Sarah, I don't deserve." "Stop." She placed her hand over his, feeling him tense, and then relax. "You're right, that you don't deserve forgiveness. None of us deserve grace. But that's what makes it grace. That's what makes it matter." She squeezed his hand gently. "You did terrible things. You're spending every day making them right. You change an entire system. You save hundreds of children you'll never meet. That's all any of us can do, acknowledge our failures and choose better." Emma came running back, her cheeks flushed with happiness, her laughter like music Sarah had thought she'd never hear again. She grabbed both their hands, pulling insistently. "Come on, the ducks are waiting, and there's a baby one and it's so tiny and perfect." Marcus looked at Sarah, his eyes holding hope and disbelief in equal measure, as if he couldn't quite believe he was being offered this gift of normalcy, a belonging, of family. Sarah smiled, her own heart lighter than it had been in years. "Come on," she echoed her daughter. "Let's go see the ducks." They walked together, Emma between them, her small hands gripping theirs with fierce joy. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, and for the first time in longer than Sarah could remember, the future felt open instead of terrifying. Some stories don't end with perfect redemption. They end with imperfect people choosing to be better one day at a time. They end with grace extended and received. They end with second chances that nobody fully deserves, but everyone desperately needs. And sometimes, in the space between justice and mercy, that's exactly enough. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of accountability and second chances, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to this channel. We share stories about real change, about people finding their way back from darkness, about redemption that costs everything. Here's my question for you. Do you think Marcus deserves Sarah's forgiveness? Or should some mistakes remain unforgivable? Comment second chances. If you believe people can truly change, or accountability first. If you think he should face harsher consequences. Your voice matters in this conversation, and I genuinely want to hear what you think. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing that even broken people can find their way to healing.